In this video, we're going to cover dynamic generation of DAGs using Airflow and covering more complex Airflow operations like sub-DAGs, which are DAGs that are just one part of a larger DAG, as well as branch operators, which allow us to have many different pathways in our pipeline. First, we're going to take a look at more complex tasks that we have from the Data Pipelines course repository. We're going to start by investigating this task in the Airflow graph, and then we're going to take a look at the actual code. So I'm in the code right now. I will switch to my Airflow. And if I go to all of my DAGs and scroll down, I should see this generate Twitter DAGs. And so here we can see the graph visualized. So we can see that we have a few new structures. First off, we haven't had one where it starts out as a linear progression and then it goes to multiple pathways and then it returns back. So we can see that first we have fill terms, and this is if we scroll over it, and we can see here that based on the coloring up here that this is a Python operator. Then we go to a branch Python operator, and this is what's going to set up our branching. So here we can see this generate search terms is generating a few different search terms. And then we see here that the different branches join again with this insert NID pop, which here we can see by color coding is a sub-DAG operator. And that joins them together, and that is going to call a sub-DAG, which again, a sub-DAG is going to essentially be its own DAG and is going to have its own set of tasks, which we can take a look at with the graphs and as well as looking at the Python code. When that sub-DAG completes, we go to email best links, which is an email operator, and then we go to clear latest, which is a bash operator. So let's take a look at the code that creates this DAG. First, we're going to open the main DAG, which is this generate twitter.py. We can see that here we have quite a few operators importing. So again, we are using the SQLite hook, we're using the DAG class, and then here we have a bash operator, email operator, sub-DAG operator, Python operator, and a branch Python operator. We can also see that we're calling in the search Twitter from our Twitter Airflow script, as well as the raw tweet directory. And then we can see that we're calling from this module subdag our Twitter subdag Python script and importing subdag directly from there. So if we look through, we can see that we have a global defined as our search terms. We have similar default arguments, and we're setting up our DAG very similarly to our last DAG. I'm gonna skip over looking at all of the code. I highly encourage you to look through it, make sure that you understand it. But here when we start defining our operators, we can see that we have fill search terms here, which is our beginning task. Then we go to generate search terms, which is our branch Python operator. Then we have our email links defined, and we have our subdag operator defined. We can see that the subdag operator here, we have a trigger rule, and this trigger rule can be set for any subdag, and it can be set using the trigger rule class, which has a series of options, or it can be set using a string. So here we're using one success, which means at least one of the upstream tasks has succeeded. So we can see that the subdag here is set equal to the subdag which we called from our subdags module. It's important to note that you need to define your subdags either in a separate directory like we've done here in subdags or with a factory function. This is because if they're defined in the main DAGs folder, then Airflow is going to detect them, it's going to pick them up, and it's going to start running them on their own schedule. So that's fine if you need the subdag to actually run on its own schedule. But part of the beauty of subdags is they allow you to kind of create these utilities that you can use across several different DAGs and build them out in a way that you can reuse. And because of that, you probably want them to only be called as a subdag of a main DAG. And again, these are just essentially subgraphs, right? They're just going to perform a series of steps. They can even have branching themselves or different parallelization that you may or may not need. And because of that, though, you can create a folder for them and you could create a series of different scripts. It's a great way to reuse code. Finally, we have our bash operator here, which we hadn't defined one before. and it takes a few different things similar to the email operator. It's going to have some different keyword arguments. So here we can see that it has a bash command. And here we see something interesting. So we have a for loop directly in the main portion of our Python script. So this is going to execute whenever this script is called, which we know Airflow does to determine, is this a DAG that I should be running? And what we have here is we're looping over the search terms, which we've defined globally, and we're removing punctuation, and then we're setting up a Python operator for each of these different search terms. And then we're setting the upstream as the generator and the downstream as our subdag. And here we can see our final ones. So if we look through, this is going to define essentially what we saw when we were looking at the visualization. We saw that it said search Python Twitter, search PyData Twitter, and a few other things. And we can see here that we're using the parameters query equal to the term. So here we can set all of the terms that we want to search Twitter for. You might be wondering why we need to have a Python operator for each of them. And this is because the way that a Python branch operator, or actually it's called a branch Python operator in Airflow works, is it's going to return a string. And that string should match a task ID. So there needs to be a task ID for each possible pathway that the branch Python operator can return. So here we can see our branch Python operator uses generate search terms. And if we look here in our generate search terms, we are essentially returning a random choice from all of the different search term values. So we need to make sure that there's a Python operator or any type of operator that is going to match that task ID. So that's an important thing to note if you're going to use branching. So now we can try triggering this DAG. There's a few things to note beforehand. You'll need to have SQLite 3 installed, and you'll need to have set the email configurations in your Airflow CFG file. And you will also want to set the email address here. So here I'm going to put my main email so I can be alerted when it finishes. I'm going to save that. Then I can go again to my trigger. Here I want to trigger generate Twitter DAGs. So now if I go over and I go to my DAGs, I'll need to turn it on. I can also turn the subdag on. That's fine because it will know that it's a subdag. And I should start to see it populate. I can look at this tree view. It's a little bit of an easier view because it's going to show me sequentially as each of these are called. So I still, again, have my scheduler and my worker running. I should hopefully see this begin to populate soon. I trigger it again. Feel free to trigger it a few times. Again, this is just going to be saving some of that data locally. So I'm going to try to see if I can see one of these manual runs. And it does say it's running. I'll have to check the logs and see what's going on. It could be that my computer is just not responding properly, but eventually you should start to see these fill up and turn green. Of course, if any of them fail, then you have that fail log, and you can take a look at the logs at any point in time. To get some practice writing your own DAGs, you can begin by modifying this task. You could instead pull search terms from a file by rewriting the fill tasks. We could also have the subdag only execute if all of the previous paths have finished by changing the trigger rule. So this trigger rule can be set either as a dummy operator. It can be run only if something fails upstream. It can be run if only all of the previous tasks have succeeded or all of them have failed. So this is going to mean that each of these pathways need to complete. There are a few ways to go about this, but one possible way is to change our branch operator to use arguments. We can then call our main DAG with each of our search terms. This would essentially be passing it either as an argument or as a keyword argument through our entire pipeline, or at least up until this point. We could also potentially add that to the database, right? A database check of what has not been run yet and run that one and continue running it until all of them have succeeded. Another good improvement would be to have the query also sent with the URLs in the attached file so that the receiver knows which search completed. So here, Let's take a look. Okay. If you make any of these improvements, feel free to send a pull request to the repository. I'd love to give you some feedback and see your code and possibly accept it and put it in the repository for others to use. You now know how to build more complex Airflow pipelines, and you should feel comfortable using this code and improving upon it. If you have a pipeline or a set of tasks you'd like to try with Airflow, now's your chance. You know how to write one of a variety of operators. You can use hooks along with the connection database to use local or external sources of data, and you have logs in case you hit any snags. I encourage you to have fun. Hopefully, your tasks are starting to turn green. To give you an idea of how this should look, we can take a look at some of these succeeded tasks. And we can see here, if I look at any of these tasks and I take the tree view, then I can start to see how it should look. I can also take a look at the Twitter task that we have running and take a look at that in tree view. So hopefully your tree view is starting to populate, and have fun and happy pipelining.